topic of my study today will be subordinate. It's subordinate but equal, and then semicolon, and they lived happily ever after. So we will rely majorly in the book of John. So the first verse that we'll read is John 1:1, and it says in the beginning, I'm using NIV. It says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. So this describes the relationship between God the Father and Jesus. Our preaching today will be divided in two parts. So the first part is we're talking about the relationship between God the Father and Jesus. So from this verse, we see that the Father and the Son are equal, and the preposition with in this context, in Greek, it indicates pros, to mean with, and to gravitate towards each other. And then the next verse will be John chapter 10 verse 30. It says, my Father, I and my Father are one. And then in John chapter 17 verse 21, it says that all of them may be one, Father, just as you are in me and I am in you, may they also be in us, so that the world may believe that you have sent me. So, and then the next one is John chapter 14 verse 8 and 9. And this one I won't read, I'll just paraphrase. So Philip wanted Jesus to show them the Father, and then Jesus asked him, Jesus told them, he who has seen me has seen the Father. So, and then throughout the scripture, and especially in John, the Father loves Jesus. Like it's written, the Father loves Jesus, the Father loves Jesus. And the word used is agape. So, so far, the Father and the Son are equal. The Father and the Son are one. The Father loves Jesus. And then the fourth one is their relationship is defined as knoweth. So in John chapter 10, verse 15, it says, just as the Father knows me and I know the Father, I lay down my life for the sheep. So the fourth principle is that Jesus knows the Father, and this is not just intellectual knowing, but it's an intimate and personal relationship. And then in John chapter 16 verse 15, I won't read, you can read that for yourself. It says that everything that belongs to the Father also belongs to the Son. And then the Father, through Jesus, the Son, created Adam and Eve. So in 1 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 3, it says, but I want you to realize that the head of every man is Christ, and the head of the woman is man, and the head of Christ is God. So from here, we see that the Father and the Son are equal, but the Son has chosen to submit himself to the Father. So we find the word submission and subject. So submission and to be subject to is a biblical principle. And then in John chapter 14 verse 28, I won't read, but the idea is that the Father is the head, and this is why Jesus said, you'll read the verse. Okay, let me read it. Sorry, let me just read it. John chapter 14 verse 28. It says, you heard me say, I'm going away and I'm coming back to you. If you loved me, you will be glad that I'm going to the Father, for the Father is greater than I am. So Jesus acknowledges that the Father is greater than he is. And then In Patriarchs and Prophets, page 36, we're told about the relationship between God and the Father and how Lucifer envied him. And Ellen G. White talks about why Lucifer envied Jesus. You might wonder, why did Lucifer envy Jesus and not God? After all, God was in a higher position than he was. And we find that Lucifer envied Jesus because Jesus held a higher position than he was, and God consulted Jesus about the creation. You can read about that in Patriarchs and Prophets. So Jesus called the heavenly host, and before them, he declared the position of Jesus before them, and this really got to Lucifer. And as you continue reading John, you see that Jesus subjected himself to the will of the Father. And in 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 6, we see that the glory of God is reflected in the face of Jesus. So we do not see Jesus' glory, but God's glory. So because it says that he lives to glorify the Father. And then you might ask yourself, doesn't that make Jesus inferior? If you read Philippians chapter 2, verse 9 to 11, I'm going to read that. Just give me a minute. Okay, I am not able to find it right now, but you can read it. The idea is that God exalted Jesus and gave him a name that is above all names. So that is the first part of our preaching today, and it talks about the relationship between God and Jesus, that they're both equal, but Jesus submitted himself to God, and this does not make him inferior. It just makes them. It's just the relationship that works for them, and we'll see why it works for them. So the second part is that this pattern that God established, that God and the Father and God the Son established, is also important for another relationship that God intends for us, and that is the relationship of marriage. And then a feminist would say, Lord have mercy, because what do you mean? But because the idea of feminism is that equality means an equality of being and function, but that's not biblical. And in Genesis chapter 5, verse 1 and 2, the word man, which is Adam, is a generic term. So when the Bible uses man, it's both male and female. And in Genesis chapter 1, verse 27, both were created in the image of God. Chapter 26, both were given dominion over everything that was above the earth. And then in verse 28, both were blessed. So in Matthew chapter 19, verse 4 to 6, it says, haven't you read? He replied, that at the beginning the Creator made them male and female. And he said, for this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, no man can separate. So the idea here is that both man and woman cleave towards each other, and they share an intimate relationship, and it's defined as new, because even in Genesis, when God was in one of the passages, God said, and Adam knew his wife. So it's more than just sexual relations, it's knowing them as even God knew the Father. In Patriarchs and Prophets, page 46, it says that God gave man a companion, a helper corresponding to him. He was supposed to be one with him in love and in sympathy. She was not to control him as the head, neither was she to be trampled under his feet as an inferior, but to stand by his side as an equal, to be loved and protected by him. In Galatians chapter 3, verse 28, you can read that We are one in Jesus. But the problem nowadays is that man has abused his position, and so kind of like, feminism has like its roots, like you can see where it comes from. So, and also the woman wants to be in the position of man, and you can read that in Patriarchs and Prophets, page 59 to understand more. And in Ephesians chapter 5 verse 22, chapter 5 verse 22, it says, wives, submit yourselves to your own husbands as you do to the Lord. And in Colossians chapter 3 verse 18 and 19, it has the same idea that wives should submit, and husbands should love. So to submit is divine, and it's a biblical principle. But for a woman to submit, it means that the man must love. And you're not told to beat your wife to submission, but to love your wife to submission. But nowadays, men don't love their wives the way that they should, and so you don't find women submitting. But submission is not a bad thing, because you can see this in the relationship between God and Jesus, and it worked for them perfectly. So, like, I'll give an illustration. The head and the body. The head carries the brain, which functions, and it tells the rest of the body what to do. But if the head will say, I don't need the body, so what will support it, and which, like, where will it transform the knowledge that it has? And also, if the body says, I don't need the head, or I want to be the head, then it won't function the way that it should function. So both are intertwined, and they are meant to work together. So this is a quote from a book. Men and women are different. Compatibility and harmony are best served when the difference is respected, and yes, even enjoyed, instead of being denied and degraded. So I'll finish by saying, husbands, love your wives, and wives, submit to your husbands. And I know that we're not married, but some of us maybe are looking to get married. And so the men here, we should pray to God, and ask them to help them to love their wives and emulate God's example. Don't abuse that position. And the women here, pray for wisdom to find a man who will love you just as God loved his son. And so with that, yes, I am done. Yeah, God, yeah, I'm done.